Welcome to another episode of Retrospective Gaming. In this episode, I am reviewing Planescape Torment. I know a lot of you have been waiting for me to put this review out. I'm happy to finally get it out there. Just a couple of quick things before we move on with the review. Number 1, I am playing this at the original resolution. And number 2, there are spoilers in this review. You have been warned. Time for my review of Planescape Torment. Now, this game takes place in the Planescape multiverse, where there are different planes of existence, and in each plane, it has its own morality and different creatures. If you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, then you know this world. The story starts off with your character, known as the Nameless One, waking up in the mortuary. Your character is bewildered. You wake up in this strange place out of nowhere with no recollection of anything you did. You don't know who you are or how you got here. As soon as you wake up, you run into Mort. Mort is a floating skull. That is right, I said floating skull. He tells you that you two are trapped here and you have to find a way out. But Mort discovers that your character has instructions carved on his back, and it tells you to find a journal and someone named Farid. There is more to this story. Your character is immortal, but who made you that way and why? You escape the mortuary and end up in an area called the Hive, and so your journey begins to find out how you got here. Where's your morality? Who were you in your past life? And to ultimately find yourself. Now, Planescape Torment focuses on dialogue, narration, character development, and character interaction. Combat takes a backseat. It's there, but the story and characters are the most important things about Planescape Torment. Now, as you progress through the game, you will confront Farid, and you will find out that he is not responsible for you being immortal. He will point you in the direction of the person that really caused your immortality. I'm not going to name who that is, and early on, you also find out that you are a reincarnation of a past life. You have lived before. There are several different versions of you that lived in this life, and you have to find out what they did, who they were, why they did what they did, and what types of individuals were they. And that's all I'm going to spoil, but I will tell you one thing. There's one question that haunts you, that follows you throughout the game. What can change the nature of a man? Remember that. The story in Planescape Torment is excellent. It's one of the best stories in video game history. It's interesting, it's engaging, it's complex and deep, and I don't exaggerate when I say that. Your character throughout the game is finding smaller pieces to a bigger puzzle, that puzzle being your life. Imagine this. Imagine you not knowing who you are, where you stand on moral issues, whether you're good, evil, or somewhere in between. Imagine you not knowing your past. That would be pretty crazy, right? Planescape Torment shines because of its writing, the way it tells its story, and its character development. This game rewards you for talking to people. It rewards you for how you handle each conversation. This is a dialogue-heavy game. There is a lot to read, and that's not a bad thing because it is a very interesting story. And there are a lot of ways to handle the situations and conversations in this game. Your character can lie and bluff. Your character can use his intelligence and charisma to come up with clever lines in order to get out of a conversation, or deepen the conversation and find out more about what's going on. And there are a lot of dialogue options. You can be a goody two-shoes, you can be an asshole, you can be clever and talk your way out of a fight, you can change the direction of a conversation. I'm very happy to tell you that there is a lot of choice in what you do in the story. And you can also discover memories about yourself. These memories are scattered throughout the world, and each memory is a clue to your past life. And I will say this, the Nameless One is a complex individual, and that's a fucking understatement. Another thing I love about the story is how I can relate to it. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Che, you are playing as a character that is immortal. How the fuck can you relate to it? It's simple. This is not a story about some grand adventure and saving the world. This is a story about finding your humanity, finding yourself. And if you think about it, that is more complex and it's a harder thing to do than simply saving the world. And when you progress through the game and you find out about what your character has done in the past and who he is, the questions start popping up. What can change the nature of man? How will we be held accountable for our actions? And how do our actions affect the people that are close to us? Rarely do I finish a game and think about its story after I beat it, but with Planescape Torment, I thought about the story days after I beat it. I still do think about it. This is an isometric computer role-playing game. You will level up, you will put points into different stats, and your actions do have an effect. And I'm not talking on a global scale. Well, in this case, I mean a universal scale. This is more about finding yourself and self-revelation. As I said before, there are different ways to handle the situations and conversations in this game. Your intelligence and charisma determines if some of these choices will be successful or if some of these choices will even pop up. Not only that, you have to pay attention to each conversation and investigate too. Your actions can also affect your alignment. If you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, you know about the alignment system. Your ethical and moral choices determines your alignment. For example, you can be a lawful good character. This is a character that believes in doing good things according to the law, or you can be a chaotic good character. A chaotic good character believes in doing good things but not really obeying the law. They want to do good things by any means necessary. There are also alignments like neutral evil, true neutral, chaotic evil, etc. And your alignment can also determine if you can use a certain weapon. Certain weapons require specific alignments in order to use them. Now, just like real life, our actions can hurt us or help us. In this game, when you're talking to people, you can benefit yourself by finding out more, getting an item, etc. But you can also shoot yourself in the foot and fuck yourself over. Your arrogance can lead to your death, and I'm not talking about a regular death. You are immortal in this game. When you die, you just spawn in a different area, and I'm not talking about that. If you're arrogant and you make the wrong choice in a conversation, you can get wiped off existence. Game over. There are certain characters in this game that you don't want to fuck with. You can also make the wrong move in a conversation and, for example, get rid of someone when they had vital information and you can't get that information. Game over. So read each conversation and think before you act. If you're a hothead like me, you probably will play this game and fuck yourself over. But don't worry, that's what save states are for. Now I'm going to give you 3 minor examples of you changing a situation. First example, there are 2 gangs fighting for control of the Alley of Angles. One gang believes in doing good, the other gang believes in doing evil, and you're caught in between. But there's more to it. You run into a person that believes both gangs need to be eliminated in order to maintain the balance. He has a neutral philosophy, so it's up to you to figure out what you have to do. Second example, there are several situations in the game where you can sacrifice or fuck over a party member for your own personal benefit. Example number 3, if you join the Godsman faction, at a certain point you will talk to someone in that area that is a spy for the anarchists, and they want you to sabotage a machine and fuck over the Godsman. You can choose whether or not to do this. Remember, this is just a small piece, a small fraction of what Planescape Torment has to offer. This is a big game. Remember that. Throughout the Nameless One's journey, you will not be traveling alone. You will have individuals in your party, and every party member I had, I wanted to know more about. I think the developer did a great job of giving the party members their own distinct personalities and backgrounds to complement the main character's quest. The banter between them did not get old, and some of it was hilarious. And to me, the most important thing about the party members in this game is that they grow with you. From start to finish, you will see a slow progression in the Nameless One's relationship with his party members. And at the end, you will see how much they've grown with you. Mort is now one of my favorite characters ever. Remember the floating skull I was talking about earlier? He is mysterious, and you get the feeling that he is holding something back. Not in a malicious way, but he is fucking hilarious, especially his banter and his conversations with female NPCs and party members. Mort is one horny bastard, and he always tries to pick up women. Absolutely hilarious. I'll tell you about another conversation with Mort that I found hilarious. This happened in the brothel for intellectual lust. This is not a brothel for people to have sex. This is about intellectual stimulation, people having intelligent conversations, playing chess, and doing other things. And when Mort comes across one of the characters, they get into a insulting conversation. They start insulting each other. They go back and forth for a while, trying to come up with the best insults and trying to hurt each other's feelings. It's funny. So yeah, Mort is very interesting. I could say more about him, but I don't want to spoil much more. I did enjoy the side characters that I had in my party. I enjoyed each one's backstory. Another one that I really liked is Anna. Anna is a tiefling, and I believe that some of her relatives were fiends, and she looks like a human except for her tail. And she's very blunt, she's very rough in the way she talks, and she just don't give a fuck. She will say what she feels, and sometimes it's not nice. And she speaks in a very rugged and rough way. She'll say "you're" a lot, and she has no problems telling you if she has a problem with what you're doing. Another one of my favorite side characters is Dakan. When you meet him, you discover things about him and yourself throughout the process of you being his friend, and it's very interesting. What I like about the party members is there's a theme to each of them, and you discover this theme and they act it out the best they can. In most games, when you have party members and side characters, they're just there to fill out the plot, or they're just there to help you in battle. Some of the side characters are tormented and haunted just like you, and that is one of the major themes in this game. The storytelling is excellent, and another thing I want to say about the side characters, with some of them, you will find out some surprising stuff about your relationship with them. Planescape Torment is a thought-provoking game. It tackles serious subjects, it's bleak and morbid, and when you go around some of the areas, it looks like they have no hope left. But it's a world that's full of life, and I know that sounds funny given what Planescape Torment is about, but this game is full of detailed characters and a lot of dialogue, and it has a charm that is all its own. You don't see a game like this every 5 or 10 or 15 years. It's in its own standing when it comes to subject matter and the atmosphere, and I'll go more into atmosphere when we talk about sound and atmosphere, but I want to give you one example of a part where the game made me laugh. You see, this is a serious game, but there are parts that are just charming too, and parts that are just hilarious. I'll give you one example. There is a building called the Civic Fest Hall. It is located in an area called Clerk's Ward, and this is a building where the upper class gather, fancy people, rich people, and the Society of Senses are located there. It's a society where people like to indulge, they like to have the finer things in life, but it's a building where a lot of interesting people are, and in this building there are people that give lectures. So I went into one of the classes to see what the person was talking about, and he was giving a lecture about death. So I'm listening, and during the lecture, Mort keeps talking about how this is boring and we should leave, let's get out of here. So I tell him to be quiet. And then I decide to show off. I tell the teacher, "You think you know about death? Well, let's make a pact, me and you, right now. We both die in front of the students, and we will see who knows more about death." Of course, the nameless one is immortal, so nothing's going to happen to you if you die in that spot. So the teacher is acting like I'm crazy and tries to call me on my bluff. I die, and I come back to life right there, and then I tell the teacher, "Are you going to die?" Now of course he's too afraid to die, so you punked him out, and you can either have the choice to kill him so he can go on his word, or you can just take that as a victory, making him look bad in front of the students and walk away. My only complaint about the story is that near the end, it starts to fall off a bit in certain parts. When you play Planescape Torment, it's about exploring, it's about investigating every area, it's about talking to your party members and finding out more about them and the NPCs and getting as much lore as possible. Combat is there, you do fight, but it takes a back seat. But right after you meet the person that is responsible for you being immortal, the game changes its direction for a short period of time, and during that time, the game all of a sudden focuses on combat more than the narrative. It focuses on combat more than exploring and talking to people, and that was just a weird change up, and it wasn't necessary. It doesn't happen like that for the rest of the game. Eventually it does go back to normal, especially at the end, but for that short period of time, it reminded me of a dungeon crawler. You're going through these linear areas and they're throwing a lot more enemies at you. You're just fighting a lot more, and I don't think that was necessary. I'm not saying that because I could not beat the game. I did beat the game. I just think that it messed with the overall consistency of the game and the story. You go from having it being about exploration and investigating, talking to people, and then you go into this small period of time where it's about combat. It didn't need that. Combat should have always been a secondary focus at all times in this game. And overall, I think the story is phenomenal, and I think it's one of the more unique stories out there in video games. If you're a fan of role-playing games, or if you're a fan of rich, deep stories, play this game. Now, later on in the review, I will talk more about the other gameplay aspects. For now, let's talk more about sound and atmosphere. The atmosphere in Planescape Torment is one of a kind. I've never seen anything like this before. I'm not too familiar with the settings in Dungeons & Dragons, but I do know that this takes place in the Planescape setting in Dungeons & Dragons, where there are multiple universes, and you start off in an area called the Hive. And when you walk around this area, you see the downtrodden, you see low-class prostitutes, you see bars, you see thugs trying to beat each other up, and there are gangs trying to take control of an area, and there's an area called Ragpicker Square. This place is terrible. It looks like shit. It looks like the whole place was made with trash, and that's pretty funny in regards to what happens in the story. You will also explore an area called Clerk's Ward. This is where the higher-ups are. It's a fancier place. It's located in the Sigil. It has a museum. It has an intellectual brothel. It has a place where some of the items cost a lot of money. Now, if you are not familiar with this game and you're thinking that you will only go to slums and upper class areas, you're dead wrong. There is a lot of variety in the places that you go. Remember, this game is set in a multiverse. You have to go through portals and you'll end up in different planes. I will show you some other examples and you will see the variety. There is an area underground called the Dead Nations, and in this area, the dead have risen. You see ghouls, you see zombies, and you will see skeletons. It's ruled by a king. Another interesting thing about this area is that the dead in this area, they are at war with their neighbors. And who are their neighbors? Their neighbors are giant fucking rats. Not only that, there are also these small rats. They're called cranium rats. And a unique thing about them, the more of them they are, and they're near each other, the stronger they get, and they will actually use magic on you when they're in a group. It can be annoying, but it's definitely different from other rats you see in video games. I am very impressed by the variety and overall uniqueness of the areas in this game. In one area, you go to a lower plane, and this place is very evil. It's called Baldur. It looks like hell, and when you're going through the area, you'll eventually head off into another area right next to it, and you see a tower of floating skulls. I'm not going to tell you why, but you see a gigantic fucking tower of floating skulls. This game just has a lot to offer in terms of atmosphere, and I really like how some of the areas are clever. Let me give you an example. This is one of my favorite areas in this game. At a certain point early on in the story, you have to go to an empty tomb, and in this area, you have to die in order to get the information that you need. That's right, you are required to die so you can complete the area, and little things like that help. I appreciate the amount of detail they put in this game, and another thing I like is that they didn't force some happy-go-lucky ending. They didn't force this, now everything gets automatically better for no reason. No, it sticks to the theme. It sticks to it being gritty. It sticks to it dealing with very philosophical questions in its own way, and I appreciate that. Now, I did enjoy the art style. You can tell by how long I went on about the atmosphere. There's just something about isometric games. The way you look at the world, the isometric point of view, and some of my favorite video game art styles comes from isometric games. It never gets old. During combat, if you cast certain spells, a mini cutscene pops up and everything pauses and you see the spell play out. For example, there is a spell called Desert Hell, and what it does is, in this cutscene, it changes the whole landscape to this hot desert, and that's how it damages your enemy. Like, you'll see a spirit hammer whacking somebody and things like that. I did enjoy seeing it. I have two minor complaints about the atmosphere. One, it's the same complaint that I had about the story. Near the end of the game, at certain parts, it just really focuses on combat in these specific parts, and it would have been better to replace these areas with areas that focus more on the narrative and character development. And two, there was this one situation in the game where I had to go upstairs and do a quest for the anarchists, and I had to assassinate somebody. I had to kill him, and I did it right in front of guards and nothing happened. This is odd because if you go into the upper ward and kill someone, the guards will automatically attack you. But when I killed this one person in front of guards, nothing happened. I don't know if it's a glitch or a bug or if that was the way it's intended, but those are my minor issues with the atmosphere. And when it comes to sound, I have no problems with the way the game sounds. I enjoyed the small amounts of voice acting that you get. This game is not fully voice acted. You'll hear banter every now and then, and some parts of the dialogue are voice acted, but it's not fully voice acted. I thought the sound effects were fine. The soundtrack is really good. When you go underground or you go into the Civic Fest Hall, you hear the main theme. It really adds to the immersion. My two favorite tracks from the soundtrack. My two favorite tracks are the main theme and the Civic Fest Hall, and you'll hear some other ones in the background of this video too. Now let's talk about the rest of the gameplay. I decided to talk about combat last because it is the least important part of Planescape Torment. This game is about going through the story, the side quests, the main quests, investigating every area, and the narrative. That's what it's about. If you're looking for a game that is focused on combat, then this game is not for you. Combat is real time, but you can pause it in the middle of combat, and a wheel pops up, and that's where you'll see your spells, your special abilities. You can use items, and the thing is, it's not the worst combat ever, but I don't think it's good or great. It's mediocre, it's very forgettable. I think the combat is unbalanced. I played the game as a mage, and at some parts, especially certain parts near the end where you rely on combat a lot more, it could be a pain in the ass. When you use your spells, you have to recharge them, you have to sleep, and in a lot of these areas, you can't wait and you can't sleep. Even if there are no enemies around you, you just can't do it. You have to run all the way back, go to an inn, or charge forward and hope for the best. And that can be very annoying. Since this game takes place in the Planescape fantasy setting in Dungeons & Dragons, I know the combat is based off of a Dungeons & Dragons rule set, but I don't think it was implemented very well. If any of you are really familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, you can let me know more about it. And that stupid wheel that you have to use, I just think that they could have used something better. The combat is not as fluid as Icewind Dale or Baldur's Gate, but for me it was manageable. I beat the game on the normal difficulty setting. They needed a bit more time to work on the combat or scrap the wheel and do something else. I think the combat would have been way better if it was turn-based combat, and I didn't really think about the combat having issues until I got to those parts near the end of the game where you had to rely on combat and they threw enemies at you left and right, and it was more linear for that short period of time. If they would have kept the consistency that they did in the first 60 or 70% of the game, I wouldn't have noticed it as much. Now, when you play this game, you'll have the option to choose between different classes like Mage, Fighter, and Thief. You have to go to certain people and ask them to train you if you want to learn a different class. And if you're a Thief, you'll get points towards your Thief skills. There's 4 of them. If you train as a Mage, you'll be able to use better spells. There's up to 9 levels of spells you can use. You have to copy scrolls in order to remember them. It's kind of simple, but the depth and complexity does not come from the classes you choose or the combat. It comes from the story, the Nameless One's journey, all the dialogue that you read, the exploring, the investigating, how do you choose to react to situations, all the dialogue options. That is where the death comes from, and this game is fantastic. I highly recommend it. This is a game that will have you thinking about your own life after you beat it. That's how good it is. As far as bugs go, my game did crash a couple of times, and I did see the enemy AI and my party AI do goofy shit sometimes, but overall I did not have a major problem with bugs. But I did read from others that this game is buggy, especially when it was released. There are mods that can fix bugs, and there is a mod that gives you higher resolution thanks to the fan base. Thank you for watching another episode. If you want to, you can leave a comment, you can message me on Twitter. Let me know what you think. You know how to get into contact with me. Have a great day.